Hello everyone. In the previous video, we were able to establish the model and the view and the controller, and we were able to load the units from the file into the picker view on our in our view in our app. And we accomplished this by going through the controller and loading the array and so on and so forth. So in this video we're going, and you can refer to the previous videos to review what we have done and how we were able to get to where we are now. We want to finish the app, and as we said, like, there are so many different ways to design this app, to design the user interface, the flow, the events that will trigger the different actions, and so on. In a brief, this app should allow the user to enter an amount, select the unit they want to convert from, and select the unit that they want to convert to, and the app will give them the conversion rate. You can establish the user interfaces any way you want. You can lay them out the way you want. Going back to a previous video, I'm going to use two picker views, one to select for the user to select the units they convert from, one for the users to select the units they're converting to, a text field to enter the amount, and a label to display the results. Then we need to think about the actions. If you go to the readings from the previous module, everything in the app is event driven. So you want to think what event will trigger the app to actually make the conversion. Simplest form, you can provide the user with a button and ask the user to click on the button. And in a more advanced form, you can make your app intelligent to recognize that the user already finished interacting with one of the fields. For instance, when the user finishes entering the amount, and they want to dismiss the keyboard, maybe that could be the event that trigger the conversion. Maybe when the user makes a selection on the picker view, maybe this could be the event that triggers the conversion, or maybe all of them. So perhaps you will create a module that does the conversion, and the conversion can be triggered by either the user clicking a button or the user making a selection on one of the picker views, or the user entering or changing the amount on the text field. So let's start and build the interface. We're going to start with only event triggered by the user clicking on the button, and then let's see if we can work and implement the different types of events. So we're going to build the user interface, add another picker view, a text field, label, a button, and then connect all of those. And we're going to be interacting with all of those components, so we'll be connecting outlets for all of them. So let's get started. I don't want the assistant editor now because I'm building my user interface. I'll bring in the utility area, and let's start by adding another picker view. Here it is, and I'll add it and change the width. And try to align it. So that's the second picker view, and I think the widths are not. And you can see the numbers of how wide it is, and try to adjust them. Almost. Alright, then we need a text field. So here is my text field, and I'll place my text field here. Or maybe like this. And then I need a button. And maybe make it smaller a little bit. And then I need a label I'm gonna put my label over here. And then perhaps we need to figure out a way to tell the user what they want to convert. Let's set some properties here. So on the text field, let's give a placeholder text that says enter amount to convert, and let's leave everything as is. On the label, let's take the label out, maybe change the color of the label. I'm gonna use green here, and you can change the font and the alignment. That's a bad green. And I don't want this label sentence, this label here. And on the button, change the button and call it convert. Okay. I want it to change the color in this. So we're ready to, so now that we built the different components that we want, then let's make the connections to the controller. Going back to the previous video, we said that we will use the controller, the view controller, which is this class that is that controls or represent the controller for the entire view or the entire screen. We will use this to be the controller of everything else, as well as the data source and the delegate for the picker views. And we are going back to project number 1 to dismiss the keyboard. We're also going to use to make it delegate for the text field. So let's, I don't need this anymore. Bring the assistant editor, and let's make the connection. So for the text field, I want to read the data from the text field, and in order to do this, I need to click on the control and drag this as an outlet. So I need my text field to be an outlet, and I'm going to call it text amount. This is the text field that represents the amount that the user wants to convert. Then the label, connect the label. This will be again an outlet because I want to put the data in there, and I'm going to call it label results. This is where I'm going to put my results. And then the button, and then the second picker view, I also want to read data from the second picker view, and I'm going to call this unit 2 picker view. The unit you want to, the picker view that represents the unit that you want to convert to. Then the actions, the convert button, I want that button to trigger an action so that the app would respond to the event of clicking on the button. So I'm going to call this action convert, and I will need an argument for this one, so select none as an argument, and for the type, an ID is fine, and then connect. So here is the convert module. So this is an action module or a method. This is a module where we write instructions for the computer to connect and to operate. So this is everything here. So let's switch to our view controller.m. But before I do this, we know from project number 1 that if we want us to have the text field dismiss itself when the user click on the return, we need to have implement this in a delegate to the text field. You can choose any class to be a delegate or any file of those to be a delegate, but since we decided to only use this view controller as a catch-all for everything, we can make this also a UI text field delegate. So we go on the user interface on the header file, go on the header file here, and between the angle brackets after the interface, that's where we specified the different protocols that we are implementing, or in other words, the responsibilities, the additional responsibilities that this class is taking on. So we add one more responsibility, that this view controller class will also be a UI text field delegate. So that's an additional responsibility that this class will take on. And to know what kind of tasks this class is now able to do as a result of taking on that responsibility, you can click on the organizer and go to the documentation and find the UI text field delegate and look at the tasks that the UI text field delegate allow you to do. So here are the different tasks. Should text field should begin editing, did begin editing, did end editing, clear, and return. And this return meaning that the user hit the return. We used to dismiss the keyword. We can also call on the conversion at that time. So that's this part. Now we switch to the implementation. And on the implementation, and to make room, I'll take away my navigation here. On the implementation, since I have properties, the first thing we'll do is to synthesize those properties. So we already did that for the picker view that represent the units from. Let's do it for all the others. So units 2 picker view, and the text amount, and the label result. Alright. Then some setup that I still also want to do on the view did load. If you notice, I assigned or declared this object, the self, to be a data source for the units from. I need to do the same for the units too. So on this line here, after I set the data source for the unit from, I want to send a message to the unit 2 and say your data source is this same class. So we'll say unit 2 set data source self. And likewise for the delegate, unit 2 set delegate self. Alright. Then we loaded the data, if you remember, and loaded that into the array. One more thing is I want to set this class to be the delegate of the text field as well. So perhaps I can come here and add one more and say declare that this object, the self, is a delegate to the text field. So this means I need to send the message to the text field amount and say set delegate and say this self is your delegate. Self is being able delegate because we added that responsibility to it here in the protocol. Had we not added those responsibilities, we could not have made self a delegate or a data source. Now, since both picker views will see exactly the same data, then I don't really need to, I'm passing the same data to both of them. So the number of components in the picker view is 1 for each one of them. Notice that each one of those methods receives as a parameter the picker view, meaning that which picker view is being loaded. So you could use this to check if it is the from picker view or the to picker view, and use an if-else statement to set different data to each one of them. In our case here, both will display the same set of units. So both of them has one column. Both of them will have as many rows as the number of items in the collection of units, and both of them will display at each row the unit at that particular item. So if we run this, you see the second picker view is also loaded without us doing anything because they are both loaded with the same thing. Before we move on to implementing the conversion itself, notice that that list of units is not sorted, is not ordered. So maybe what we can do is we sort that list, because if you have that list and it's a long list, and as you can see, for simplicity in our case, we only have one category. We're not really filtering the units, but sorting it might be important. So let's go back. When we load the units into the collection, let's sort that collection first. So I'm going to go back to the implementation where we loaded those units and sort that unit. So I will come after the line where I loaded the content of the file into the unit, and I will add another step here, say sort the data in the collection. So how do we sort? Well, you probably don't know, so it doesn't matter that you don't know. What matters is how can you figure out? How can you figure out? So first, who do you think, which component would be responsible for sorting the collection? In other words, if there is a message to sort this collection, who should we send that message to? So, as you probably thought correctly, you would first expect that this is being sent to the units, the array, because the array is the collection, so you will tell the array sort yourself. So let's see if there is something in the units that can sort itself. So say units and then sort. Let's type S and look for sort. So here is the sort. So there are different ways of sorting. And each one of them says it returns an array. So you send this message, it gives you back an NS array star that you have to save it somewhere, receiving in ascending order as determined by the comparison method. So this one returns them in ascending order, and it compares them using that comparison. What does that mean? Since the array can have as many type of objects, and those who build this want to make it generic, they don't know how to compare them. Because if you have apples, how do you compare apples? If you have money, how do you compare money? If you have cars, how do you compare cars? So you have to provide how you can compare. At the same time, there are some well-defined ways where you can compare, especially in our case where we are comparing strings. So I'm passing on. I clicked on the help, and you probably didn't see that. So sort, and this is the one I selected, the one that has ascending order, and you see the description that comes here in the list, and there's more. If you click on more, it takes you to the documentation in the organizer where you can read more about this. So it says there is a selector, and it says the selector identifies a method to compare. For example, an array of NS string objects can be sorted using case-insensitive compare method declared in the NS string class. Assuming an array exists, a sorted version of the array can be created in this way. So you see in the discussion, there is exactly the information on what we need to do, because that's our case. We have an array that exists, which is units, that has NS string objects, which is the titles of the units, and so this is the line I want to make. And since the sorted array, I want to put it back in the unit itself, so I'm kind of overriding the units with the new sorted array because I'm not really needing it anymore. But that's what I need to do. I will add a selector, and then this is the selector that I'm going to use. And don't worry about selector at this time. So let's come here and say and select the sort array using selectors, and then we will select, put the at, and see in the at we've always used the first one, which is the string. Now there's another one which is the selector, and the one we will select is the case insensitive compare, or if case sensitive is important, you can use case sensitive. So that's another option too. All right. So that will sort the collection. Everything else is the same because everything else uses the unit or whatever inside it. Oops, I forgot to, I went too early. So this will sort the array in units and return that array. Right now, I did not assign that array to anything, so it will be lost. So I need to assign it to where I want this array to be, and I want it to be inside units. So I'm overriding units. Now we look into this, and you should be able to see them sorted. So here is it sorted in ascending order, and both of them reflect that. We will stop here, and in the next video we will implement the conversion.